Good morning, everybody. This is Scott with Pratt& Associates Realty. I wanted to talk today. I wanted to address a video I made 2 days ago on my TikTok about a big lawsuit coming to the Georgia Association of Realtors. There's a big National Association of Realtors lawsuit. It's been settled out. It was the Burnett case. If you want to look it up, you're welcome to do so. The crux of that case is that a group of brokers in the Kansas City, Missouri area were a part of an MLS that was owned by a National Association of Realtors that required compensation to cooperating members. Now, there are several MLSs owned by National Association of Realtors that require compensation. If you sign a deal with me in those MLSs and a buyer's agent's brought to the table and we're trying to negotiate commissions, if it doesn't meet the level of compensation that the MLS dictates, then the seller's forced to pay more in a case like that, at least from my understanding. Now, if you want to go back and research it and correct me, you're more than welcome to do so. But it doesn't look good in that case. It is being appealed. The judge didn't apply the correct method of law, and it forced the jury to come to one particular conclusion. So the case is being appealed. In Georgia, it's a little bit different. Now, Georgia's different in a lot of ways, real estate wise. Everything's very negotiable. Our contracts, the Georgia Association of Realtor contracts, have never said, even since 2010 when I first got in. That was very vague back then, but basically the caveat is any cooperating commission, if any, is paid out as such, either a dollar amount or a percentage point. You got to understand that at least in the state of Georgia, there is no such thing as a set rate of commission. There's no such thing as a 6% commission. That's just what the market over time has dictated. Our contracts have never said, and they especially say that now, and they spell it out very plainly. They've already changed our contracts for 2024, and it's very plainly stated that that the seller does not have to pay a buyer's agent commission. A buyer's agent can have their client pay them commission. We'll talk about why there's some problems with that, but also in the state of Georgia, our Uniform Deceptive Trade Practices Act does not permit class action lawsuits to be brought to an agency that's regulated by the state. We have the Georgia Real Estate Commission, which is a consumer advocacy group, not a real estate agent advocacy group. If I have a problem with another broker and I take it up to the GREC, they'll laugh at me. They say, take it up with your realtor board, not us. We're here to make sure that you don't screw up any consumers' lives. And they should do that. And I'm glad that they exist. I've been audited before. I gave them all my information. They passed me and everything. And I was glad that they are actually going through every agency in the state of Georgia and doing that. They should do that because there's some agents out there that are kind of schmicky. So you got to watch them. So there's that. Also, we have in the state of Georgia, we have statutes of limitations for some of these cases that will reduce any of these kind of cases brought forward down. Most of the listings sold in the state go through First MLS. That's the biggest one in the state of Georgia. It covers most of Metro Atlanta. FMLS is not owned by a realtor association, and it doesn't have a minimum compensation requirement. You can put in that compensation line anything that you want to put in there. So again, that's going to be hard as well. I know a lot of agents in the past say, well, typically seller pays commission. Typically. What actually happens is the seller pays a listing broker that percentage of commission. The listing broker elects to share that with a buyer agent in order to entice a buyer agent to bring their client to the property to sell it. If you don't have that, or if you have sellers in the future who elect not to pay a certain amount of commission, then what will happen is agents put on the listing side 0%. And if my buyer wants to go see it, I'll say, listen, they're not paying anything. I feel like I have value in my time. And, especially if I'm working with just a customer, absolutely not. I'm not going to do, 3% work for zero. And I don't mean that in a mean way. But what will happen is a buyer is unrepresented, goes to the property. They don't know what they're doing. They don't navigate the process well. Then they get in a position where either they lose their earnest money because they want to back out of the deal, or later they find something really wrong with the property that was not disclosed properly, because there are certain requirements that a listing agent discloses to a member of the public versus someone who's represented. And I just feel like there's going to be a lot of lawsuits that will result in it. We had so much of this happen back in the 80s that we created buyer's agency, and we created an option for buyers to pay that agent to represent them, to not have any kind of form of liability in the future. So the market dictated that. I'm not saying that you have to pay that 6%. And also, I've negotiated contracts for 4%, 5%, 6%. I think I had one 7% deal in the past. I don't really remember it. It's been a really long time ago. But I don't know. I think it's not. I think it's more or less like there's this big money grab in the market. A lot of people from 2020 to now paid really high commissions, and they're kind of like upset about it maybe. And they feel like they were taken advantage of or something. And so even though it's something that they voluntarily agreed to pay, they want to try to get some money back in some way. It's going to be very hard in the state of Georgia to do so. Let me see what else for my notes. Oh, a lot of well, yes, Scott, but a lot of companies settled. That must mean an admission of guilt. Not so much. They have spent, some of these companies were spending $20 million a year to try to fight this case. And they just got to the point where they're like, I can't afford this anymore. You'd be surprised. A lot of these real estate brokerages, there's very few that have that kind of $20 million a year. There's very, very few, nationally speaking, not just Georgia, nationally speaking, that have $20 million a year to litigate stuff. You're going to see this. You're going to see real estate agents moving from brick and mortar offices to remote, cloud-based real estate offices, and even I'm considering doing that. I have a brick and mortar, but it's a very small office. It's the size of my kitchen. I just store files there and meet people there if they need to take tests. It does have a nice conference room if I want to meet people there, if we want to host students there, because we do have a real estate school. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this. Our contracts for 2024 are completely changed as well. Not to change that, like not to hide something, but it just really puts in bold print, like the seller does not have to pay a buyer agent commission. They elect to pay that buyer's agent commission. Why do you do that? Let's say we take a listing, I put it in there, I put 0% for the buyer's compensation. Well, what that buyer's agent is going to do with that customer or that client, they're going to say, I can't represent you on that. They're going to ask me to do all this work for 0%. You can go and represent yourself. I don't think they even want to represent themselves as a customer, because then when you're represented as a customer, you still don't get the full level of service from an agent. There's things that they don't have to tell you. They have to disclose material fact, but there's certain things that like they just, hey, what price should I offer? I don't know. Do your research. Here's information to research that with. And that's not a mean thing. It's just if you're asking me for my time, for my resources that I pay for a lot of money for per month, and for me to like drive around and all this kind of stuff, like I can't. You're asking me to do something you're asking me to work for free. So the problem is a person's going to go up unrepresented to these properties, and eventually, if something happens in the deal that's wrong, the buyer wants to back out, they can't back out, or they lose their earnest money, or if they don't lose their earnest money, they close the deal, and something that should have been disclosed wasn't disclosed, then you're going to have a massive amount of buyers suing sellers. So that's what we're dealing with. I'd like to see this case come about. I think it will help set a precedent for buyers, sellers, and real estate agents, and will clear up this very confusing kind of industry and what people think are just greedy agents, or well, all they did was just work for 1 weekend and they made $12,000. It's like, well, would you rather your house sit for 3 months? I have structured my entire life to make sure that house sells as fast as possible. And it's not just those 2 days of the weekend that I'm working. I'm working throughout the whole month to close your deal out. Sometimes it takes more than that. The typical transaction is about 45 days. That's what I've noticed. So we'll watch the case. I'll keep you posted and keep you updated. If I have more I want to say, I'll post that as well. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens here in the next year or so. So stay tuned and click like and subscribe. And thank you so much. And if you have anything to like offer or thoughts, or I don't need derogatory comments. Well, of course, realtors want to be paid. They're greedy. We're not greedy. We are working. Like if you don't see what we're working behind the scenes, I would, somebody who thinks that we're overpaid, shadow me for a transaction. Shadow me for an entire transaction. Yeah, there's gonna be days where nothing's said or done, but I am calling other people to get other transactions going. But shadow me for like a month, and we'll see. So have a nice day. Click like, subscribe. Thank you, and have a great day.